Hi, I'm Chris Brown. This is ClarkCountyToday.com, having another conversation with one of our local elected officials. And we got a big name today. It's Mayor Anne McEnerny-Ogle, the mayor of Vancouver. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
So, we can get into the big stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. I know we don't have you for that long, so we'll have to breeze through it. But I just kind of want to start with, we know about Mayor Anne McEnerny-Ogle, the elected official, the public servant, the planning commission, all of that. Tell me about Anne McEnerny-Ogle, the person. What do you want people to know about you outside of your day-to-day business at City Hall?
Oh, well, that Terry and I, my husband of almost 39 years, still love to travel and get out and about outside and enjoy what's going on outside. But we also just enjoy being together, working together. Terry is, people think that I do all the baking. I can make a great pie, but what the secret to our family is, I put it together and then Terry actually watches it in the oven to make sure it doesn't burn. So that's how we make everything work. He is. But we are just a normal middle-class family. Retired teachers.
So what made you decide you retired? I know you had been, involved in government for a while. What made you decide I want to go into this full-time, part-time job as mayor?
I think it started when Terry and I decided that we wanted to put an apartment above our garage for Terry's mom. Margaret was born and raised in Vancouver. She was getting on in years. She designed an accessory dwelling unit, the first of its kind, back in 1988. There wasn't a code for that. And so we went to the city and worked with the city on building this new idea of an apartment above the garage. Margaret had designed many homes in her lifetime. And as we worked through this, we realized what planning meant, what a comp plan meant, what ordinances and building codes and all of that. As we worked through that process, I found it fascinating and then applied for the Planning Commission. As we worked through the Planning Commission, I was interested in how we write ordinances and how the impact of those ordinances made its way throughout the entire community and how we build Vancouver and plan for the future. One step after another. It's a lifelong learning experience. And so whether it was planting trees or designing ADUs or how do you figure out the speed of concurrency and all of that, as a retired mathematician, I was fascinated by it. And so each step just gave me a little more information. I wanted to know how it impacted my community and how I could improve my community, and that led me to serving on the city council, mayor pro tem, and then mayor.
Wow, quite the path there.
Yeah.
But, it's fascinating because I think if you ask most politicians, that's probably where it started, is you had a personal situation.
You're right.
That sort of evolved into getting involved in politics, and then, you get fascinated by the process. Speaking of politics, speaking of elected officials, the legislature just wrapped up their 105-day session. I found it fascinating. First time since 2009 they've wrapped up a long session on time.
I know.
With a flurry of activity. Just over a week ago. I know the City of Vancouver got a few things out of that. I went through the capital budget. We got nearly $5 million for the new, for Port of Vancouver's Terminal 1 site,
yes.
which is
that was exciting
amazing.
for them.
That's really exciting because that's really, it's a separate entity from what's going on at the waterfront for Vancouver, but it's a piece of that, really is that connecting piece between what's happening at the new waterfront.
That's right.
And then what's going to be going on there on the east side of the bridge, which we could talk about in a sec. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the bridge. They had about $8 million. They bumped that up at the end of the session to $35 million. So a huge commitment
surprised us.
Coming out of the state to go towards planning for that. Give me your sense from what you were hearing from the legislature of why they made that investment and what does that mean in your mind for how that project is going to go forward.
Well, Chris, as you know, the governor started off with that 17.5, and then you're right, it went down to the 8. And then when it came back up to 17.5 with an additional 17.5 for design and planning, that surprised us. I think as our Southwest Washington delegation, Senator Rivers, Senator Wilson, and Senator Annette Cleveland, Paul Harris, Brandon Vick, and all of those individuals put it, they wanted to make a strong statement to Oregon, come back to the table, let's move this project forward. So in the previous week and a half before that, they had passed statewide significance, which means that it's on a fast stream for permitting. We know there's that somewhere between $170 and $190 million that the two states owe the federal government.
Right, I was going to bring that up.
Yes, so that meant they wanted to make a strong statement, not just to Oregon, but to the federal government. We're moving this project forward, so we don't need to repay those millions of dollars. Some of that is still very good and we can use it. But we don't need to repay that in September. Here's where we're at. We want to move forward. Let's get this project going. So they made that strong statement.
Now, I know that Senator Cleveland has said multiple times, because a lot of people are bringing up that, well, is this just a revival of the Columbia River crossing? I know that and she has said multiple times, look, we're still in the early phases of this, but I have to ask you, because the mayor the governor of Oregon and the governor of Washington have both said they see light rail as a necessity for this bridge. That was one of the key factors that led to the demise of the Columbia River crossing on the Washington side of that. There's been a lot of people that have said this is just a revival of that doomed project. We're going to spend a bunch of money again. We're going to come to an impasse and it's going to die. In your mind, has the public opinion changed enough that we're willing to accept what was the locally preferred alternative back then? Or if not, what needs to change to make this something that people will get on board with?
Well, first of all, Chris, we haven't asked the public. We dropped this project 6 years ago. More than 10,000 people have moved into the city of Vancouver since then. I've met people who, don't know we have a lift bridge, don't know about that cracked trunnion, don't know why we're replacing the bridge, because they don't use the bridge. They live outside of that area, so they're not in that bridge influence, and they don't understand the process, let alone the project. So we're starting the conversation all over again. As I said earlier, when the legislature had that, the notebook, the initiative of what permits are still available, the inventory, we know that underwater, some of those studies are still good. But we haven't had a major earthquake, we haven't had major flooding, so a lot of the underwater studies might still be viable. Definitely above, things have changed dramatically. We have to do all new traffic congestion pieces. We have to have the discussion about high capacity transit. But more than anything else, we have to talk about funding. We have no idea what funding is available. The funding that we had went to Hawaii. The federal funds are gone. So what do we cobble together for a funding package? What will the federal government have in that $2 trillion infrastructure package that the president and DeFazio and the team are putting together? Will there be funds there for a bridge? Will there be funds there for high capacity transit? Funds were there a long time ago. We don't even know if they're there. So no preconceived notion going into this. We have no idea how the discussion is going to go because we haven't discussed it with our community. We have so many new people. We need to ask them. We need to listen. The only thing that the mayors, Southwest Washington, the ports, and the county agreed on is replace the bridge. High capacity transit, we need transit, in a dedicated guideway, an exclusive lane, and that's it. We need to find out what money is available and how to move the conversation to listen to our community of what they have, what they want, because we have so many new people here that weren't here before.
Okay. This next question is sort of a setup for the one. Well, I should tell you my plan for the new interstate bridge. Okay. I want a giant tower and zip lines. So you go, you park, you get and you just zip line.
Where are you going to park? Down at Terminal 1?
We'll have to figure it out. We've got so much development going on. So last September, the new Vancouver Waterfront Park opened. That obviously is still majorly under development.
Wow, yes.
I know there's been some conversation about some of the city-owned property near City Hall, near Esther Short Park, in that area. I've covered a couple of things with the Tower Mall redevelopment in the Heights District.
Good.
You guys are going to be hearing about Block 10, where that's going.
Yes,
shortly,
in a couple hours, yes.
at a work session. I'm just scratching the surface of the major projects that are going on in the city. What does that tell you in terms of where Vancouver is headed, that we have this many different things going on at once?
Well, it goes back to the comprehensive plan that we prepared several years ago and that we continue to update. We knew, working with the county, that we were going to increase population. But we also did an inventory of all the lands. And think about East Vancouver and all of those rock quarries that we had, both down on 14 and off of SR 500 and beyond up into the northern section of that. We knew Section 30 and those rock quarries were going to be done and then fill up and then be developed. We knew Fourth Plain was going to start growing. After we put the Vine in, that bus rapid transit came in on time, under budget, and has a higher ridership. But we also knew that we had an operations center there that was going to need to be replaced. So we're looking at Fourth Plain. You mentioned Tower Mall. A huge opportunity came forward. We didn't want 20 years of storage units at Tower Mall. And so we were able to make that purchase, and now we're almost finished with it. But all of the sub-area plans that we have been working on are now starting to come forward with excitement. And it's not just the waterfront on the far west. It's all of that land on the east side. And because we have land, different individuals and companies in Oregon and Southwest Washington and Arizona and also are looking at us with different eyes. We have land. We're close to the mighty Columbia River. We're close to an international airport. We have good, strong east, west, north, south train and transportation. We are prime because we have land. And so we're trying to make sure that our growth happens in a controlled way with our zoning, with our sub-area plans and private development, and our staff works with them to make sure that we're meeting their needs, but that we're also meeting the needs of all of the employees and the residents in the community. So it's quite a balancing act to make sure that we have some control and that we're meeting the needs of those people who want to be in Vancouver, but also Southwest Washington.
So you know that's a setup to talk about Stronger
Yes,
Vancouver.
I do. Yeah.
Because you heard from the Executive Sponsors
Right.
Council recently
Right.
with some of their, it's
Recommendations.
been a long process to get
Yes,
there.
yes.
And that's going to be a long road still to go to figure out where we go from that. But at some point, all of this growth is going to mean going to the citizens of the city and saying, and you have, there's been a number of surveys through this, you're going to have to make a case that we're going to have to go to the voters and say we need something more.
We need revenue.
So talk a little bit about how do you make that case? What do you see coming out of that process, going to the voters and saying, what do you want to pay for?
Okay. Well, first of all, the Executive Sponsors Group met for nearly 2 years to figure out how do we fund government, knowing that we are growing and growing and growing. We have not grown our employees, since the Depression. Our police force is not up to where it was before the Depression recession. Our Parks Department, our operations, we have still far fewer employees than we did back in 2006, 7, and 8, and you look at the numbers. But the population has exploded, businesses have exploded. So when the sponsors sat down, they made a recommendation. Here are capital projects that we think you should work on, and here are services we think you should work on, and here is possible revenue to consider. You can imagine the restrictions on each one of those pieces of revenue. So we have received this 4.5-inch binder, and next Monday we'll start cobbling together our advanced college class on how to fund government. So we'll start with a project. What is replacing these 2 fire stations? What does that mean? What are the costs? what is the recommended revenue for that? Is it something councilmanic? Is it an entertainment fee? Is it a property tax increase? Is it a B&O? Is it a head tax? Because the sponsors council made a recommendation because they thought the nexus would be close to this particular capital project, for example. Council will need to look at each one of those projects to identify, yes, we want this, or no, we don't need this now. We can postpone this 2, 3, 4, 5 years on down the road. As we go through each project, each revenue, we'll be taking notes because we're going to have a test at the end of this. We're going to study these for about 5 or 6 months. Go out to our neighborhoods, go out to our businesses, all of our faith-based organizations, different groups, nonprofits, to say, how do you feel about this project? What do you think about this revenue source for this project? And as we prepare that and get closer on down the line, then we'll look to see what's left of their recommendations. What did we decide not to do or put off, pay as you go? What revenues are we comfortable with? Which are we moving off that we're not comfortable with? And we'll go back to the entire community to say, okay, for the last half a year we've been working with you. How do you feel about this? We'll lay out a timeline. What will be councilmanic? What will be voter approved? What do we and how do we time this? But for example, we have businesses who just came out of the legislature who have some changes happening at the state level.
Right. I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
And they don't know what that's going to mean for them come January 1 of 2020. We need to take that into the conversation. We need to work with our businesses so they have confidence that they can plan, not just us.
Right.
So this is a long process, and that's why we haven't done it. When you look back over the last 20 years that we've had this structural deficit in government, this is why it's so complicated that we've kept putting it off. And even the county is putting it off. As we look at it, we need to make some decisions because we need to plan for the next 10 years and give our community and give our businesses the confidence so they can plan. So it's not going to be easy.
Right. Let's move on to a simple subject, homelessness.
Nice try. Oh my gosh.
But it's part of the same conversation, isn't it? And that, this is an area of investment.
Right.
Now, I wanted to get your take because, obviously social media was blowing up with this Como documentary called Seattle is Dying. Right. And when I watched it, what I took away was they posited that really it wasn't as much a housing crisis as it was a drug addiction crisis exacerbated by rising housing prices, right? That people who are dealing with a drug addiction need stability to be able to get out of that.
Sure.
And so I'm just curious, I don't know if you've seen the documentary.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure that
you
have had numbers of conversations within, your department about, well, how do we deal with that? What's your takeaway from what you know, talking with Council for the Homeless and all that about what's going on?
And actually talking with homeless individuals. So, Chris, yes, there are those individuals who started with drug and alcohol issues and became homeless. We also have individuals who became homeless for a number of different reasons, and then mere survival on the street and the stress of sleeping under the laurel hedge next to this particular area has brought on alcohol and drug use. But they're not all in drug and alcohol problems. They're not all mental health issues. I've sat with individuals and met with them, talked with them, 3 individuals, Dan, Don, and Dale. All working men. They had showered, they'd washed their clothes at the Navigation Center. They each had appointments. It was cold, cold, cold. They had jobs, but not jobs that paid enough for housing. They were looking for roommates. They were looking for anything that they could partner up, have a roommate, and get into something and get off the street. One was a retired plumber who had broken his hip. Can you imagine crawling under a kitchen sink with a hip replacement? No, and he lost that ability. Drug and alcohol use? Not that I could tell. Very much wanted to figure out how to get off the street. One gentleman was a security guard for the Trailblazers down at the Moda Center and lived here, worked down there, knew the Trailblazers, knew all of that, but again was looking for a roommate. Nice conversation, easy conversation, but looking for a way to live off the street. And many of the people around me were working on computers, some were watching while they were waiting for appointments. Individuals who couldn't afford the rent. When I went out for a point in time count in January, cold, miserable time, you knock on the tent, you have your federal form that you're supposed to fill out. The young man that was there lived with his grandmother and actually pointed down the street to where they lived. She died. He didn't have enough income to stay there, and so was sleeping in a tent all tucked away and working, not making enough for that first month, last month, all of those different cleaning deposits and everything else. Again, looking for an opportunity to get in off the street. Yes, drugs and alcohol and mental illness continue to be a problem, but people don't choose Vancouver to be homeless in. The people that I'm talking to, the people that I'm meeting, and I still bake cookies for them. On Saturday when Jamie Spinelli and her outreach team go out and talk to them and work with them, they want to come in. How do we get in? And that's what the City of Vancouver, with Council for the Homeless, with the county, are trying to figure this out. We have 6 shelters. They're full. Do we build additional shelters, or do we put them closer into housing? When you take that finite amount of money, do you put it in a shelter to get from the tent into shelter and get off the street? Or do you put it into that transitional housing? And so that's where we'll disagree, because the city and the county are trying to negotiate that piece. But we very much want to get them on the path, taking those baby steps. So whether it's Merriweather Place or Lincoln Place, all of the different ways that we're cobbling together money with the council, with the state adding some money to Vancouver Housing Authority, with our Affordable Housing Fund and CDBG and home and everything, trying to build those opportunities for our workforce employees to live and work. That's tough. But guess what? That happened during World War II. We had workforce housing during World War II for the shipyards. So we're back into the same routine again. We're trying to build housing for our workforce more than anything else.
Let me ask you, because as you mentioned the Navigation Center, I've had some conversations with some folks around there.
Right.
I know you're a member of the Facebook group that posts a lot of complaints about what's happening around there. Just give me your sense of what they're complaining about. They've brought some complaints to the city about issues of drug activity happening there, people camping in the area, finding needles, finding human waste, things like that. How do you view their concerns, and how does the city go about?
Oh, we absolutely appreciate their concerns and are working on it. In our thinking, we need to make this Navigation Center a success, to bring the people in, get them the services they need, work with them so they feel comfortable getting those services, and get them into housing. Whatever we can do to make that a success, not just for those that are homeless, but for the entire neighborhood, we're willing to do. Is it additional security? Yes, and we brought in additional security so that they're outside working with individuals who are outside, maybe on the sidewalk, working with Walmart on the other side of the street, working with the neighbors around. So, for example, the talking trash folks are individuals who we hire who are homeless, and they go out and clean up garbage. And they start at the navigation center each morning, and they go out and they clean and clean and clean and clean. And then they go out to other parts of the city, and then they come back, and at the end of the day, again, they do once around, about a 3-4 block radius around that entire navigation center. People camping, yes, we've had people camping, but we've had people camping there before too. But individuals have noticed an increase, and so we want to make sure that our police and our outreach individuals and our talking trash individuals and our security are working with each one of them, because I want the neighbors around to feel secure. I don't want them to worry that that they have a fear. If they want to walk their neighborhood and go to any of the businesses around there, they should be able to do that at day or night. The other piece of that is the 80% of that navigation center that's not being used. So we want to have that conversation with the neighbors. What asset would be helpful for them? Is it a health clinic? Is it a health center? That not just for the homeless, but maybe it's something that all of the neighbors could use. Is it a shelter for women and children? We need to have those conversations. We said we would have those conversations in the fall. So we're trying to solve our problems now. It's been open for 5 months. What are some of the issues? How do we solve that before we go to the next step? But we want to make the navigation center a success for everyone.
Let me move on. I know we've taken a lot of your time. I wanted to ask one final question, though. Obviously, we had the officer-involved shootings earlier in the year.
Right.
3 of those involved black men. I know that brought quite a lot of people to some of the council meetings to ask for an examination of department policy, which Chief McElvain has promised is an ongoing thing.
Yes.
And then there was also a demand for lapel cams.
Body cameras,
Which, again, comes back to money, if we're going to do that, and other conversations. But just give me your take at this point. What are the conversations that are continuing to happen inside City Hall? Or
the chief is ready for that conversation. The chief has worked with the councilors, with the city manager, and with having conversations with the guild and his command staff. Yes, body cameras are the conversation that we're having right now. The who, what, where, when, why, and how. How does it work? How do you manage it? What are the costs? What are different communities around the state of Washington doing? What are the best practices? How do you keep thousands and thousands of hours of body film, of camera film? You can imagine how much it takes for just a half hour of your film on this camera. Imagine all 200 officers and all of their work hours and all of that footage. How do you maintain it? How do you keep it? What are the requirements? Those are the conversations we're having right now, and the chief will share all of that with us and with the community as we move forward with that. But he's also dedicated for the policies and the training. And so as we just left the promotion ceremony today with new officers, new lieutenant, new sergeant, and a new assistant police chief, the chief is looking at his command staff and looking at his new assistant chiefs to bring them into that conversation on training, policies, body cameras, all of that conversation. They do continuous training, and then weekly and daily briefs on lots of different things. It's not a one and done on all of the training and diversity and mental illness and disengaging individuals in tense situations. This is ongoing daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So the chief is extremely active in it, and he's out in the community. He'll sit in the middle of a neighborhood meeting, the NAACP, LULAC, whatever, wherever he is invited, and share that same conversation with them. Bring the community together. Let's make some policies. Let's talk about it. How do we want to work together and move this forward?
So I've asked you all the questions that I had to ask. I'll give you the
Sure.
opportunity to close this out. Anything that you want to bring forward or
Oh, my goodness. Well, we have so many different things, whether it's, as you pointed out, the waterfront or all of 192nd, Section 30, new development down at the Palisades, 4th Plain, Mill Plain. We haven't talked about a new bus rapid transit on Mill Plain, but that's going lickety-split, and C-Tran will be the poster child of the nation because C-Tran has done so well with their budget and their checklists and all of those. We have changes in routes. We bring in the community. They talked to us about the 39th route. We made some changes, and Sean Donaghy and his staff put those forward. We are talking about a new jail for the county, so we should be wrapping up those conversations here in the next couple months and give our recommendation to the county on their jail. Our new operations center and the new property that we'll be building for the operations center. But I think the big piece right now is Stronger Vancouver. Everything that we've been talking about is part of this package, and getting this out to the community, educating the council, getting it out to the community, bringing the community in and engaging them in that decision-making process is our number one priority right now.
all right. Mayor Anne McEnerny-Ogle, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it.
Thanks, Chris.
Let's do it again.
Okay.